Every night, a loyal dog named Bailey sat at the edge of a quiet park, barking relentlessly at an old oak tree. No matter the hour or the weather, his focus never wavered. But when curious locals decided to investigate what Bailey was trying to reveal, they stumbled upon a secret so shocking, it changed the community forever. It was a crisp autumn evening in the small town of Greenvale, and the air was filled with the earthy scent of fallen leaves. The sun had set hours ago, leaving the park bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. In the center of the park stood a majestic oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching toward the heavens, casting eerie shadows on the ground below. Bailey, a golden retriever with soft, expressive eyes, had made this spot his nightly vigil. He sat there, staring up at the old oak, barking with a determination that puzzled everyone who witnessed it. Bailey wasn't just any dog. He was known for his gentle nature and unwavering loyalty to his owner, Anna, a quiet woman who had moved to the town years ago. At first, locals thought Bailey's behavior was harmless, attributing it to a squirrel or a bird perched in the tree. But as the days turned into weeks, Bailey's barking grew more intense and his visits more frequent. Rain or shine, Bailey would show up, sit at the base of the oak, and bark as if trying to tell a story no one could hear. The mystery began to draw attention. Children whispered about the haunted tree, weaving tales of ghosts and hidden treasures. Older residents recalled rumors about the park's history, of secrets buried and stories left untold. The oak, once a symbol of peace and beauty, now seemed shrouded in a quiet tension. Anna, deeply worried about Bailey's obsession, tried everything to coax him away. Treats, toys, even walks to his favorite spots. Nothing worked. "What's going on, boy?" she murmured one evening, kneeling beside him. Bailey turned to her briefly, his warm eyes filled with urgency, before resuming his watch. It wasn't until a group of neighbors decided to take matters into their own hands that the mystery began to unravel. With flashlights in hand and their hearts pounding, they gathered at the base of the tree, determined to uncover what had captured Bailey's undivided attention. The group of neighbors gathered at the edge of the park, their breath visible in the crisp night air. Among them was Mark, the town's handyman, who had lived in Greenvale all his life. Beside him stood Grace, a retired teacher with a knack for solving puzzles, and her teenage grandson, Leo, who had insisted on joining after hearing whispers of a hidden secret. Anna, holding Bailey's leash tightly, looked at the group with a mix of gratitude and worry. "I don't know what's gotten into him," she admitted, her voice shaking slightly. "He's been doing this every night for weeks. It's like he knows something we don't." Mark nodded, shining his flashlight toward the towering oak tree. "Dogs are smart. If Bailey's fixated on this tree, there's got to be a reason." The group exchanged uneasy glances as Bailey tugged against the leash, his barking growing louder the closer they got to the tree. Hannah reluctantly let him go, and he sprinted to the base and sniffing the ground and pawing at the dirt with frantic determination. "Look at him," Grace whispered, her eyes wide. "It's like he's trying to dig something up." Leo, holding a camera to document the night's events, crouched beside Bailey. "Do you think something's buried here?" he asked, his voice trembling with excitement. Mark stepped forward, his flashlight illuminating the tree's massive trunk. "Could be," he muttered, "but it's strange. This tree's been here longer than any of us. If something's hidden, it's been here a long time." Bailey's barking reached a fever pitch as he clawed at a specific spot near the tree's roots. The group hesitated, unsure of what to do next. Finally, Mark knelt beside the dog, pulling a small trowel from his pocket. "Guess we find out," he said grimly. As Mark began to dig, the others crowded around, their flashlights creating shifting shadows that danced across the gnarled roots. The first layer of soil gave way easily, revealing a patch of discolored earth beneath. Bailey stood beside Mark, his tail wagging furiously, his barking replaced by a low whine. "What is it?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark paused, brushing away the dirt with his hands. "Feels like, wood," he said slowly. He cleared more soil, revealing the corner of what appeared to be a small wooden box. Grace gasped. "A box? Here? Why would someone bury that under a tree?" The group leaned closer as Mark carefully pried the box from the ground. It was old, its surface weathered and cracked, but it remained intact. Bailey circled excitedly, his nose twitching as if he could sense its contents. "What do you think is inside?" Leo asked, his camera trained on the box. Mark hesitated, his hands hovering over the lid. "Only one way to find out," he said, his voice heavy with anticipation. With a creak, the lid opened, revealing its contents. Inside were faded photographs, brittle with age, and a small notebook bound in leather. Anna reached for the notebook, her hands trembling as she flipped it open. The pages were filled with spidery handwriting, the ink smudged in places. "It's a journal," she said softly, her eyes scanning the text. "Whoever wrote this, they were hiding something." Grace leaned in, adjusting her glasses. "What does it say?" Anna read aloud, her voice wavering. "I couldn't keep it anymore. The guilt was eating me alive. I had to put it somewhere no one would find it, under the old oak, where it would be safe. But if you're reading this, please forgive me." The group fell silent, the weight of the words settling over them. Mark cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Sounds like a confession," he said. "But for what?" Leo pointed at the photographs, his curiosity getting the better of him. "What about those? Maybe they'll tell us more." Grace picked up one of the photos, holding it under her flashlight. It showed a group of people standing in front of the oak tree, their faces blurred with time. "This must have been taken decades ago," she murmured. "Do you recognize anyone, Mark?" Mark squinted at the image, his expression darkening. "No," he said slowly. "But something about this doesn't sit right with me." Bailey let out a sharp bark, startling everyone. He darted toward the tree again, his nose pressed against the bark, his body rigid with focus. Anna frowned, clutching the journal tightly. "There's more," she said. "Whatever they were hiding, it's not just in this box." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Grace, ever the pragmatist, stepped forward. "If Bailey's still acting like this, we can't stop now," she said firmly. "We need to figure out what else is going on." Mark nodded, his flashlight sweeping over the tree's massive trunk. "Agreed. If there's more to this story, we're gonna find it." With Bailey leading the way, the group prepared to uncover the next piece of the puzzle, unaware of the shocking revelations that awaited them beneath the oak's ancient branches. Mark resumed digging near the base of the tree, following Bailey's insistent pouring. The soil, though compacted with time, was easier to move as if it had been disturbed before. The flashlight beams danced across the uneven ground as the group waited in tense silence. Bailey's ears perked, and his tail wagged furiously, his nose never leaving the spot where Mark worked. Suddenly, Mark's trowel hit something hard. The dull thunk echoed in the quiet night, causing everyone to freeze. "What is it?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark wiped the sweat from his brow, carefully brushing away more dirt. "It feels like metal," he said slowly. He worked quickly but cautiously, revealing a rusted latch attached to what looked like a metal panel buried deep in the ground. "A hidden compartment?" Leo suggested, his voice tinged with excitement. Mark nodded, his expression grim. "Looks like it. But why bury something like this under a tree in the middle of a park?" Anna knelt beside Mark, gripping Bailey's collar to keep him from jumping into the freshly unearthed hole. "Whatever it is, it must have been important enough to hide," she said, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. Using a crowbar from his tool belt, Mark pried at the latch. It gave way with a metallic screech, and a small door, roughly the size of a suitcase, swung open to reveal a dark, hollow cavity beneath. Grace shined her flashlight into the opening. The beam illuminated what appeared to be a sealed tin canister, wrapped in layers of old brittle cloth. Mark reached in cautiously, his fingers brushing against the container's cool surface. He pulled it out, setting it on the ground for everyone to see. "What's inside?" Leo asked, his camera trained on the canister. Mark hesitated. "Only one way to find out," he said. He removed the cloth, revealing the canister's lid. With a firm twist, it opened with a hiss of stale air escaping. Inside, they found several items: a stack of yellowed documents, a small velvet pouch, and a folded letter. Anna picked up the letter, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. The handwriting was neat, but hurried, the ink smudged in places. She read aloud, "To whoever finds this, I beg you to tread carefully. What lies hidden here is the truth about the day everything changed. They'll come looking for it if they know it's been disturbed. Protect it at all costs. Signed, J.W." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Grace's brow furrowed. "Who's J.W.?" she asked. Anna shrugged, her fingers tracing the initials. "I don't know, but whoever they were scared." Leo reached for the velvet pouch, opening it to reveal a collection of old coins and a small key. The coins glinted in the flashlight beam, their intricate designs suggesting they were centuries old. "These look valuable," Leo murmured, holding one up to examine it closer. "But why bury them with this other stuff?" Mark picked up the stack of documents, flipping through them quickly. They were brittle and faded, but he could make out fragments of handwritten notes and what appeared to be an old map. "This isn't just random junk," Mark said. "It's like someone was trying to hide something important." Bailey barked suddenly, pulling the group's attention back to the tree. He stood rigid, staring up at a specific branch, his body tense and his growl low. "What now?" Grace asked, her voice shaking. Mark aimed his flashlight toward the branch Bailey fixated on. The beam caught something glinting in the light, a metallic object lodged high in the tree. "What is that?" Anna asked, shielding her eyes from the glare. Leo squinted, adjusting the zoom on his camera. "It looks like a box." Mark handed his flashlight to Grace and began climbing the tree. The rough bark scraped his hands, but he moved quickly, driven by curiosity. As he reached the branch, he saw the object clearly, a small metal box secured with rusted nails. He pried it loose, careful not to lose his grip, and climbed back down. The group gathered around as he set the box on the ground. It was small, no bigger than a shoebox, and covered in dirt and rust. "Another box," Grace said, her voice heavy with disbelief. "How many secrets does this tree hold?" Mark opened it, revealing its contents: a bundle of photographs and another folded piece of paper. The photos depicted a group of people standing in front of the oak tree, much like the ones they'd found earlier, but these were clearer, and the faces were more recognizable. Anna gasped, pointing at one of the figures. "That's Mayor Collins," she said, "and that's Mr. Turner, the town historian. These people, they're all connected." Grace picked up the folded paper, her hands shaking. It was another map, but this one had markings that seemed to correspond with the park's layout. A red X marked a spot near the tree, with the words "Final Resting Place" scrawled beside it. "Final resting place," Leo repeated, his voice trembling. "What does that mean?" Bailey barked again, his growls growing deeper as he pawed at the ground near the base of the tree. Mark stood, his expression dark. "I think we're about to find out." The group braced themselves as they prepared to dig deeper, unaware that what they were about to uncover would change everything they thought they knew about their quiet little town. The tension among the group was palpable as they prepared to continue digging near the base of the tree. Bailey, usually playful and energetic, now acted with an unusual seriousness, his paws clawing at the earth as if he were determined to reveal the tree's hidden secret. The flashlight beams danced across the dirt, highlighting every root and shadow. "Mark, are you sure about this?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "What if we're messing with something we shouldn't?" Mark paused, looking up at her with a resolute expression. "Grace, whatever's buried here was meant to be found. Bailey's trying to tell us something. We owe it to ourselves to find out what it is." Anna knelt beside Bailey, stroking his fur to calm him down. "Good boy," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the rustling of leaves. "You're doing great. Show us what you've found." Leo stood back, adjusting the focus on his camera. "If this turns out to be some cursed treasure or ancient crime scene, we're going viral for sure," he muttered, half joking. "Leo, not everything is about the views," Anna snapped, her patience fraying. Mark ignored the exchange, his focus entirely on the task at hand. He grabbed a larger shovel and began digging where Bailey had been pouring. The dirt was loose, almost as if it had been disturbed recently, which only heightened the group's anxiety. As the minutes ticked by, the hole grew deeper. Suddenly, Mark's shovel hit something solid, a wooden surface, much larger than the metal compartments they'd discovered earlier. He stopped and motioned for the others to gather around. "It's a box," Mark said, his voice heavy with anticipation. "A big one." Grace took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to leave. "What if it's a coffin?" she whispered. Leo laughed nervously. "Come on, Grace, you're letting your imagination get the better of you." But Grace wasn't the only one who felt uneasy. The air around the group seemed to grow colder, and the once gentle rustling of leaves turned into an almost ominous whisper. Even Bailey, who had been so determined moments ago, now stood frozen, his ears flat against his head. Mark worked quickly, clearing the remaining dirt until the entire wooden surface was exposed. It was an old, weathered crate, secured with iron hinges and a rusted padlock. The group exchanged nervous glances. "Who wants to do the honors?" Mark asked, holding up a crowbar. Anna stepped forward, her hands trembling. "I'll do it," she said, her voice firm despite the fear in her eyes. As she wedged the crowbar under the lid, the wood groaned in protest. With a final push, the lid popped open, revealing the crate's contents. Inside were several small burlap sacks, each tied with twine, and an old journal resting on top. Mark reached in and picked up one of the sacks. It was heavy, and when he untied it, gold coins spilled out into the dirt, their surfaces gleaming even in the dim light. "Gold," Leo said, his voice barely a whisper. "Is this real?" Anna picked up the journal, her fingers trembling as she flipped through its pages. The handwriting was neat, but faded, and the entries detailed transactions, dates, and names. "This isn't just treasure," Anna said, her voice shaking. "These are bribes, payments made to silence people. Look at the names. These are prominent figures in town, politicians, business owners." Grace's face paled as she leaned over Anna's shoulder to read the entries. "This is a ledger," she said. "Whoever kept this was involved in something huge." Mark picked up another burlap sack, revealing more coins and a bundle of photographs tied together with a piece of string. The photos depicted familiar faces, some of the same people from the earlier pictures they'd found, standing together in what appeared to be clandestine meetings. "This can't be real," Leo muttered, lowering his camera for the first time. "It's real," Mark said grimly, holding up one of the photos, "and it explains why someone went to such lengths to hide it." Bailey barked suddenly, startling everyone. He stood at the edge of the hole, his gaze fixed on the tree's trunk. "What is it now?" Grace asked, her voice tinged with fear. Mark shone his flashlight on the tree, and that's when they saw it. Carved into the bark, partially obscured by moss, were initials. J. W. "The same initials from the letter," Anna whispered. Mark ran his fingers over the carving, his mind racing. Whoever J.W. was, they knew about this. They probably buried it here to keep it safe. But safe from what? Grace asked. Before anyone could answer, a sudden noise broke the silence, a rustling in the bushes nearby. The group froze, their eyes darting toward the sound. "Did you hear that?" Leo whispered, gripping his camera tightly. Bailey growled, his body tense as he faced the direction of the noise. Mark stepped in front of the group, holding the crowbar like a weapon. "Who's there?" he called out. The rustling grew louder, closer, until a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. The group gasped, their fear palpable. "Looks like you've found something that doesn't belong to you," the figure said, his voice low and menacing. The shadowy figure stepped closer, his boots crunching against the fallen leaves. The group instinctively huddled together, with Bailey standing protectively in front, growling low and steady. The flashlight beams wavered as trembling hands tried to focus on the intruder's face. "Who are you?" Mark demanded, his voice firm but tinged with apprehension. The man stepped into the dim light, revealing a weathered face partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. His piercing eyes scanned the group before settling on the open crate at their feet. "That doesn't belong to you," he repeated, his tone cold. Mark tightened his grip on the crowbar. "And who does it belong to? This has been buried for decades." The man smirked, his expression unreadable. "That's none of your concern. What matters is that you leave it alone." Anna, still clutching the journal, stepped forward. "This isn't just treasure. It's evidence of corruption, something someone didn't want anyone to find." The man's eyes narrowed. "You think you're uncovering some grand conspiracy? Trust me, you don't want to dig any deeper into this." "Why not?" Leo chimed in, his curiosity overriding his fear. "What's so dangerous about a few gold coins and some old photos?" The man glanced at Bailey, who hadn't stopped growling. "That dog knows what's at stake, even if you don't," he muttered. "Animals can sense things that humans are too blind to see." Grace shivered, clutching her arms as the wind seemed to grow colder. "What do you mean?" "What things?" Ignoring her question, the man crouched and ran his fingers over the initials carved into the tree. His face hardened, and for a moment it seemed like he was lost in thought. Then he stood abruptly and pointed at the crate. "Cover it back up. Walk away." "Pretend you never saw this." Mark shook his head. "No, whatever's buried here is connected to something bigger. We can't just ignore it." The man's jaw tightened, and his voice turned icy. "You're making a mistake. Some secrets are buried for a reason. Digging them up will only bring trouble." Anna's hands trembled as she held the journal tighter. "Who are you protecting? These people hurt others, didn't they? They used their power to hide their crimes." The man's expression softened for a brief moment, almost as if he was conflicted. "You don't understand. If you keep going, you'll put yourselves in danger. There are people who'll do anything to keep this buried." Bailey barked sharply, breaking the tense silence. His ears were pinned back, and his body was rigid, as if sensing imminent danger. "Something's wrong," Grace whispered, her eyes darting around the forest. "We shouldn't be here." The man took a step back, his hand hovering near his side as if reaching for something concealed beneath his coat. "This is your last warning. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Mark stood his ground. "We're not leaving until we understand what's going on." Before the man could respond, a loud crack echoed through the forest, like a branch snapping under pressure. Everyone froze, their eyes scanning the darkness. Bailey barked again, louder this time, his focus shifting to a cluster of bushes nearby. "What was that?" Grace whispered, her voice trembling. The man's demeanor shifted, his previous confidence giving way to unease. "You've already attracted attention," he muttered. "They're coming." "They? Who's they?" Leo asked, his camera now recording the unfolding chaos. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned on his heel and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the group alone with the open crate and a growing sense of dread. "We need to leave," Grace said urgently, tugging at Mark's arm. But Mark wasn't ready to abandon their discovery. "No. If he's right, then we need to figure out what's going on before someone else finds us." Anna flipped through the journal again, her eyes scanning the faded pages for clues. "There's an address here," she said, her voice rising with excitement. "It's not far from here, an old storage facility." Leo looked skeptical. "You think we should follow some random address in the middle of the night? This feels like a horror movie waiting to happen." "It's our only lead," Mark said firmly. "Whatever's in that storage facility might explain all of this." Bailey barked again, snapping their attention back to the present. His focus was now on the direction the man had disappeared. "We don't have much time," Anna said, glancing at her watch. "Let's go before whoever they are shows up." Reluctantly, the group gathered their belongings, leaving the crate uncovered in their haste. Bailey led the way, his nose to the ground as if he already knew where they needed to go. As they navigated the winding forest path, the air grew colder, and an eerie silence settled over the area. Every rustling leaf and snapping twig made their hearts race, and the sense of being watched became almost unbearable. When they finally emerged from the forest, the address in the journal led them to an abandoned building on the outskirts of town. The structure was old and decrepit, with broken windows and a sagging roof. "This place looks like it's been abandoned for years," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mark pushed open the rusted door, the hinges squealing in protest. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Bailey sniffed the ground, his tail wagging slightly as if he'd caught a familiar scent. "Spread out," Mark said. "Let's see what we can find." As the group began searching, Bailey stopped suddenly, his ears perked up. He barked once, then darted toward a locked door at the back of the building. "What is it, boy?" Mark asked, rushing to follow. Bailey pawed at the door, barking insistently. Anna held up the journal. "There's something written about a safe room. This must be it." Mark inspected the door, noticing a keypad lock. "We need a code," he said. Anna flipped through the journal again, her eyes landing on a series of numbers scrawled in the margin. "Try this," she said, reading them aloud. Mark punched in the code, and with a soft beep, the lock disengaged. He pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with filing cabinets, old photographs, and a metal safe in the corner. "This is it," Anna whispered, her voice tinged with awe. Before they could begin exploring, a loud bang echoed through the building, followed by hurried footsteps. "They found us," Grace said, her voice trembling. The sound of hurried footsteps grew louder, echoing ominously through the empty corridors of the building. The group exchanged nervous glances, their adrenaline spiking as the reality of their situation set in. Bailey's growls deepened, his stance tense as he positioned himself between the group and the direction of the noise. Mark clenched his fists, his mind racing. "We have to barricade the door," he said urgently, pointing toward the entrance. "Whatever's coming, we can't let it get in here." Leo and Grace scrambled to move a rusty filing cabinet against the door, while Anna, still clutching the journal, scanned the room for anything useful. Bailey barked sharply, his gaze fixed on the dark hallway beyond. "Whoever they are, they're not going to stop," Anna whispered, her voice trembling. "That man in the forest wasn't lying. We've stepped into something we shouldn't have." Mark crouched beside Bailey, stroking his fur in an attempt to calm the dog and himself. "We didn't come this far to back down now," he said firmly. "We need to figure out what's in that safe." Anna nodded, flipping to the back of the journal. "There's a combination here," she said, her finger tracing over faded numbers. "It might work." Mark and Leo moved to the safe, their hands shaking as they worked together to input the combination. The lock clicked, and with a creak, the safe door swung open. Inside, they found stacks of documents, old photographs, and what appeared to be an old key wrapped in a piece of cloth. Anna carefully unwrapped the cloth, revealing the key's intricate design. "This must unlock something important," she murmured. Grace picked up a photograph from the safe. It showed a group of men standing in front of a large oak tree, their faces partially obscured. In the background, the outline of a building loomed, the same one they were standing in now. "These men," Grace said, her voice shaking. "They're connected to the tree. This goes deeper than we thought." Before anyone could respond, the sound of metal scraping against metal filled the air. Someone was trying to force the door open. "They're here!" Leo shouted, backing away from the barricade. Mark grabbed the crowbar, his grip tightening. "We can't let them get to us. Stay behind me." The group huddled together, their fear palpable. Bailey barked ferociously, his sharp barks echoing through the room like a warning bell. The door rattled violently, and then, with a deafening crash, it burst open. A group of shadowy figures stormed in, their faces hidden by masks. The leader, a tall man with a commanding presence, stepped forward, his voice cold and menacing. "You've seen too much," he said. "Hand over the documents and leave, or you'll regret it." Mark stood his ground, the crowbar raised. "We're not going anywhere until we know the truth." The man chuckled darkly. "The truth? The truth won't do you any good if you're not alive to tell it." Anna stepped forward, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "Why are you so afraid of these secrets being revealed? What are you hiding?" The man's smile faded, replaced by a steely glare. "Some things are meant to stay buried," he said. "You're playing a dangerous game." Bailey lunged forward, growling and barking furiously. The man flinched, clearly unnerved by the dog's aggression. "Call off your mutt," he snarled. Mark shook his head. "Bailey's only reacting to the danger you brought here." The tension in the room was suffocating, every second stretching into an eternity. Grace clutched Anna's arm, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do?" she whispered. Anna glanced at the documents in her hand, then at the key. "There's more to this," she said. "We have to get out of here and figure out what this key unlocks." Mark nodded, his jaw set. "We'll distract them. Anna, Grace, take Bailey and run. Find out what this key is for." "What about you?" Grace asked, panic in her voice. "We'll hold them off," Mark said firmly. "Now go." Before anyone could argue, Mark swung the crowbar at the nearest intruder, catching him off guard. Leo joined in, using a broken chair leg as a makeshift weapon. Anna hesitated for a moment, her heart pounding, before grabbing Bailey's leash and pulling Grace toward the back exit. "Come on," she urged. "We have to move." The trio dashed down a narrow hallway, Bailey leading the way with his nose to the ground. Behind them, the sounds of shouting and scuffling grew louder, mingled with Bailey's intermittent barks of alarm. They burst through a side door into the cold night air, their breath visible in the dim moonlight. Anna clutched the key tightly, her mind racing as she tried to piece together the puzzle. Bailey paused, sniffing the air before tugging them toward the edge of the property. "Where is he taking us?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Anna admitted, "but we have to trust him." As they ran, Anna glanced back, her heart aching for Mark and Leo. "They'll be okay," she told herself, as much to convince herself as Grace. "They'll find a way out." Bailey led them to a secluded spot near the tree line, where an old overgrown trail began. His tail wagged slightly, as if he'd found the next step in their journey. Anna took a deep breath, holding up the key. "This isn't over," she said, determination hardening her features. "We're going to finish what we started." As Anna, Grace, and Bailey followed the faint trail into the forest, the air seemed to grow heavier, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. The path was narrow and overgrown, with gnarled roots snaking across the ground. Bailey moved confidently, his nose low as he sniffed out the way. But Anna's mind raced with questions. "What do you think this key opens?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Anna shook her head. "I don't know, but it has to be important. It was hidden for a reason." Bailey stopped suddenly, his ears perked up and his tail stiff. He let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on something ahead. Anna and Grace froze, their breaths catching in their throats. "What is it, boy?" Anna asked softly, crouching beside him. Bailey's growl deepened as he inched forward. The faint sound of rustling leaves reached their ears, and Anna tightened her grip on the key. "Stay close," she whispered to Grace, stepping cautiously forward. As they rounded a bend in the trail, a strange sight came into view. An old rusted metal door embedded in the base of a massive tree. The door was covered in moss and vines, almost completely camouflaged against the bark. Bailey barked once, wagging his tail as if to say, "This is it." Grace stared in awe. A door, in a tree. How is that even possible? Anna examined the door, her fingers tracing the faint outline of an engraved symbol, a series of concentric circles surrounding a single, pointed star. The key in her hand felt cold, its design eerily similar to the engraving. "This must be it," Anna said, holding up the key. "Whatever's behind this door, it's what they've been trying to keep hidden." Grace hesitated. "Do you really think we should open it? What if it's dangerous?" "We've come too far to turn back now," Anna replied firmly. She inserted the key into the lock, her heart pounding. It turned with a heavy click, and the door creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A damp, musty smell wafted up, and Anna's stomach churned. She glanced at Grace, whose face was pale but resolute. "Are you ready?" Grace nodded, clutching Anna's arm. "Let's do this." Bailey led the way down the staircase, his nails clicking against the stone steps. The light from Anna's phone barely pierced the darkness, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. The air grew colder with each step, and the faint sound of dripping water echoed around them. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a small chamber lit by an old and flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The room was filled with shelves lined with dusty jars, faded books, and strange artifacts. In the center of the room was a large, ornate chest covered in intricate carvings. Anna approached the chest cautiously, her fingers trembling as she reached for the latch. Grace stayed back, her eyes darting nervously around the room. Bailey sat beside the chest, his eyes fixed on Anna as if urging her to continue. When Anna opened the chest, her breath caught. Inside were stacks of old documents, sealed envelopes, and photographs. But what drew her attention most was a small, leather-bound journal resting on top. She picked it up, carefully flipping through its pages. The journal was written in a shaky hand, the ink faded but legible. It detailed the activities of a secretive group that had operated in the town decades ago, using their influence to amass wealth and power. The entries grew darker as they progressed, hinting at sinister rituals and sacrifices performed to maintain their control. "This is insane," Anna whispered, her eyes scanning the pages. "These people, they weren't just corrupt, they were dangerous." Grace found a bundle of letters tied with twine and began reading one aloud. "To ensure the legacy of the group, the tree must remain undisturbed. It is both our sanctuary and our secret." She looked up at Anna, her face pale. "They used the tree to hide everything." Bailey barked again, his attention shifting to a corner of the room. He pawed at the ground, whining softly. Anna hurried over, using her phone's light to examine the area. She noticed a loose stone in the floor and pried it up, revealing a small metal box. Inside the box was a sealed envelope marked with the same concentric circle symbol as the door. Anna tore it open, her hands shaking. The letter inside was short and ominous. "Should the sanctuary be breached, the Guardians will awaken. Protect the secret at all costs." Grace backed away, her eyes wide. "Guardians? What does that mean? Before Anna could respond, a low rumble shook the room. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the light bulb flickered wildly. Bailey barked frantically, his hackles raised. "We need to get out of here," Grace said, panic rising in her voice. Anna grabbed the journal, letters, and photographs, stuffing them into her bag. "Let's go." As they raced up the stairs, the rumbling grew louder and the walls seemed to close in around them. When they burst out into the forest, the door slammed shut behind them with a resounding thud. The ground beneath their feet shook, and the trees swayed violently as if coming to life. Shadows darted between the trunks, and a chilling howl echoed through the night. "What's happening?" Grace cried, clutching Anna's arm. Anna held Bailey's leash tightly, her mind racing. "I don't know, but whatever it is, it's tied to that tree and it doesn't want us here." The forest seemed alive, its movements synchronized with the panic coursing through Anna and Grace. The ground trembled beneath their feet as Bailey barked furiously, standing his ground in front of the now sealed door embedded in the tree. Shadows flitted between the trees, their shapes unrecognizable, but undeniably menacing. Anna gripped Grace's hand tightly. "We need to figure out what's going on. Those documents, there has to be something in them." Grace hesitated, her voice shaking. "What if we've unleashed something we can't stop?" Anna glanced at Bailey, who stood alert, his body tense and his ears perked. "Whatever it is, Bailey's not afraid. That means we shouldn't be either." The two women moved deeper into the forest, away from the rumbling tree. As they walked, Anna pulled the journal from her bag and flipped through its fragile pages. Each entry painted a picture of a group so consumed by their hunger for control that they'd turned to dark and ancient practices. One entry caught her eye. "The Guardians are bound to the tree, their strength tied to its roots. They will awaken if the sanctuary is threatened. Those who disturb the balance will face their wrath." Grace read over Anna's shoulder, her breath catching. "Guardians? You don't think—" Anna looked at her, her expression grave. "I think the forest is reacting to what we did. But we didn't disturb the balance, they did." Bailey barked suddenly, snapping their attention back to the path. His tail wagged furiously, but his posture remained guarded. Ahead, the faint glow of lanterns illuminated a clearing. The light revealed a group of people standing in a circle, their faces obscured by hoods. Anna and Grace crouched behind a fallen log, watching the scene unfold. The figures chanted in unison, their voices low and rhythmic. In the center of the circle stood a stone altar, its surface carved with the same concentric circle and star symbol as the tree's door. Grace whispered, "Is this the group from the journal?" Anna nodded. "It has to be. They're still here, still protecting their secrets." Bailey let out a low growl, but Anna placed a calming hand on his head. "Not yet, boy. We need to figure out what they're doing first." The chanting grew louder, and the air in the clearing grew colder. One of the figures stepped forward, holding a wooden box similar to the one Anna had found in the hidden room. The figure opened the box, revealing a collection of artifacts, candles, bones, and a small vial of dark liquid. Anna's stomach turned. "They're performing some kind of ritual." Grace gripped her arm. "We need to stop them." "No," Anna said firmly. "We need proof first. If we stop them now, they'll just regroup and try again. We have to expose everything." As they watched, one of the figures placed the vial on the altar and began speaking in a language neither Anna nor Grace recognized. The forest seemed to respond, the wind howling through the trees and the shadows growing darker. Bailey barked sharply, his body trembling with tension. The hooded figures turned in unison, their faces hidden in shadow. "They know we're here," Grace whispered, her voice shaking. Anna stood, pulling Bailey's leash. "Run!" The three of them bolted through the forest, the sound of footsteps and snapping branches following close behind. The hooded figures moved quickly, their lanterns bobbing in the darkness. As they ran, Anna's mind raced. The journal had mentioned that the group's power was tied to the tree, but it hadn't explained how to stop them. She clutched the bag of evidence tightly, knowing it was their only chance to expose the truth. Bailey led them to a small cave hidden beneath a rocky outcrop. They ducked inside, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps outside grew louder, then stopped. Anna held her finger to her lips, signaling for silence. She listened intently, her heart pounding. After a few tense moments, The footsteps faded into the distance. Grace slumped against the cave wall, her face pale. What are we going to do? They'll find us eventually. Anna pulled out the journal, flipping to the last few pages. We need to figure out their weakness. There has to be something in here. Bailey sniffed around the cave, his ears twitching. He pawed at a pile of rocks, uncovering a small opening that led to a hidden tunnel. "Good boy," Anna whispered, patting his head. She turned to Grace. "Come on. If we stay here, we're sitting ducks." The tunnel was narrow and damp, the air thick with the scent of moss and earth. Anna held the journal tightly, using her phone's light to guide the way. The pages revealed more about the group's history, including details about their rituals and the power they drew from the tree. "They've been here for generations," Anna said, her voice echoing in the tunnel. "They use the tree to store their power, but if we can destroy it..." Grace looked at her, her eyes wide. "You think we can stop them?" Anna nodded, her determination growing. "We have to. It's the only way to end this." Bailey barked again, his tail wagging as the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. In the center of the room was a massive root system, its twisted tendrils glowing faintly in the darkness. "This is it," Anna said, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of the tree." The cavern pulsed with an eerie energy, the glow from the tree roots casting shifting patterns on the walls. Anna, Grace, and Bailey stood frozen, taking in the surreal sight. The roots twisted and coiled like living things, their faint light illuminating strange symbols etched into the stone floor. "This must be the source of their power," Anna murmured, her voice barely audible over the faint hum that filled the air. Grace shivered. "It feels alive." Bailey growled low, his gaze fixed on the roots. The fur along his spine bristled, and Anna placed a comforting hand on his back. "Easy, boy. We're here to stop this." Anna set her bag down and pulled out the journal, flipping to a page that described the group's rituals. One passage stood out. "To sever the connection, one must disrupt the core. The roots will resist, but their destruction is the key to ending the Guardian's power." Grace leaned over her shoulder, reading the words with wide eyes. "Disrupt the core. How do we even do that?" Anna scanned the room, her mind racing. "We'll need to cut through the roots. If we can break their connection to the tree, we can stop them." Grace hesitated. "What if it makes things worse? What if we unleash something even more dangerous?" "We don't have a choice," Anna said firmly. "If we don't stop them, they'll keep using this power to control the town. We have to try." Bailey barked sharply, drawing their attention. The sound of footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. Anna's heart sank. "They're coming." Grace glanced around desperately. "We need to act fast." Anna grabbed a sharp rock from the ground and approached the largest root, its glow intensifying as she got closer. She hesitated for a moment, then plunged the rock into the root with all her strength. The effect was immediate. The root writhed violently, emitting a high-pitched screech that reverberated through the chamber. The glow flickered, and the hum grew louder, filling the air with an almost unbearable vibration. Grace covered her ears. "What's happening?" Anna pulled the rock free and struck again, determined to sever the root completely. As she worked, Bailey barked and growled, positioning himself between the women and the tunnel. The hooded figures appeared at the entrance, their lanterns casting long shadows on the walls. The leader stepped forward, his voice echoing ominously. "You should not have come here." Anna stood her ground, gripping the rock tightly. "We're not letting you keep this power." "It ends here," the leader laughed coldly. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. The tree's power is not just ours, it belongs to the Guardians, and they will not allow this." As if on cue, the roots began to pulse more violently, their glow intensifying. The air grew colder, and an otherworldly howl echoed through the chamber. Shadows gathered at the edges of the room, their forms shifting and swirling like smoke. Grace backed away, her eyes wide with fear. "What are those?" "Guardians," the leader said, his voice filled with reverence. "You've awoken them." Bailey barked furiously, his body tense and ready to defend. Anna glanced at him, her determination unwavering. "We have to finish this," she said to Grace. "Keep them away from me while I destroy the roots." Grace nodded reluctantly, stepping forward to face the hooded figures. "Stay back," she shouted, her voice trembling but firm. The figures hesitated, but the leader raised a hand, signaling them to advance. Grace grabbed a branch from the ground and swung it wildly, forcing them to keep their distance. Meanwhile, Anna continued hacking at the roots, her arms aching from the effort. The roots writhed and screeched with each strike, their glow dimming little by little. The shadows in the room grew darker, their forms coalescing into distinct shapes. They resembled massive beasts with glowing eyes and sharp and claw-like appendages. One of them lunged at Anna, but Bailey intercepted it, leaping with ferocity. His barks echoed through the chamber as he fought to protect her. "Good boy, Bailey," Anna shouted, striking the root with renewed vigor. The leader of the hooded figures stepped closer, his voice rising in anger. "Stop this now or you'll regret it." Anna ignored him, focusing all her energy on severing the root. With one final strike, the root snapped, its glow extinguished in an instant. The chamber shuddered violently, and the shadows let out an ear-piercing wail. The leader screamed in rage, "You've doomed us all!" The remaining roots began to thrash wildly, their light flickering erratically. The walls of the chamber cracked, and debris rained down from above. Anna grabbed Bailey's collar and turned to Grace. "We have to get out of here." Grace dropped her makeshift weapon and ran to Anna's side. Together, they sprinted toward the tunnel, Bailey leading the way. The chamber collapsed behind them, the sound of crashing stone and the wails of the shadows fading into the distance. As they emerged into the forest, the ground shook one final time before falling silent. The air was still, and the oppressive energy that had hung over the woods was gone. Anna and Grace collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Bailey stood beside them, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, "We did it." The forest lay eerily quiet, the stillness a sharp contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. Anna, Grace, and Bailey remained on the ground, catching their breath as the cool night air wrapped around them. The once vibrant glow of the tree had vanished, leaving the woods bathed in the faint light of the moon. Grace sat up, her voice trembling. "Did we stop it? Is it really over?" Anna looked back toward the cave entrance, now sealed by rubble. "We've disrupted their power source, but I don't think they're gone. Not yet." Bailey's ears perked up, and he let out a low growl. Anna followed his gaze and saw figures emerging from the shadows. The hooded group had survived the collapse, their robes tattered and faces smeared with dirt. At the forefront was the leader, his eyes blazing with fury. "You fools!" he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've upset a balance older than time itself." Anna stood, pulling Grace to her feet. "We know exactly what we've done. We stopped you from controlling this town with your lies and fear." The leader laughed bitterly. "You think this is over? The Guardians don't need the tree to exist. They are eternal, and they will make you pay for what you've destroyed." As if summoned by his words, the forest around them came alive. Shadows materialized into monstrous forms, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. The Guardians had not disappeared. They had been unleashed. Bailey barked furiously, positioning himself between the women and the advancing shadows. His body trembled, but his courage never wavered. Anna clenched her fists, her mind racing. "We need to keep moving. If we stay here, we're sitting ducks." The leader raised his hand, and the shadows surged forward. "You can't run from them. They'll hunt you down no matter where you go." Ignoring his taunts, Anna grabbed Grace's hand and took off into the forest, Bailey following close behind. The Guardians gave chase, their otherworldly howls echoing through the trees. Branches whipped at their faces, and the uneven ground threatened to trip them with every step. Anna's lungs burned, but she pushed forward, driven by the need to protect Grace and Bailey. "We need to find a way to stop them," Grace shouted, her voice barely audible over the sound of their pursuers. Anna racked her brain, recalling the journal's entries. One line stood out: "The Guardians are bound by their creators. To sever their control, one must destroy the symbols of their summoning." "The altar!" Anna exclaimed. "We have to destroy the altar." Grace's eyes widened in realization, but it's back in the clearing where they were performing the ritual. "It's our only chance," Anna said. "We'll have to fight our way back." They skidded to a stop, turning to face their pursuers. The Guardians loomed closer, their forms shifting and writhing as they moved. Bailey growled, his body tense and ready to defend. Anna picked up a large branch from the ground, wielding it like a club. "Stay behind me," she said to Grace. The first guardian lunged, its claws swiping through the air. Anna swung the branch with all her might, striking the creature's shadowy form. To her surprise, it recoiled, its shape flickering like a dying flame. "They're vulnerable!" Anna shouted. "We can fight them!" Grace grabbed a branch of her own, joining Anna in fending off the guardians. Bailey lunged at another, his sharp teeth sinking into the ethereal mass. The guardian let out an otherworldly shriek, dissipating into the night. With renewed determination, the trio fought their way through the forest, each step bringing them closer to the clearing. The hooded figures followed, their chants echoing through the trees as they tried to summon more guardians. Finally, the clearing came into view. The altar stood at its center, the wooden box still resting on its surface. The symbols etched into the stone glowed faintly, pulsating with a rhythmic energy. Anna didn't hesitate. She ran to the altar and grabbed the box, hurling it to the ground with all her strength. It shattered on impact, spilling its contents across the forest floor. The glow of the altar flickered, and the symbols began to fade. The guardians let out a collective wail, their forms disintegrating into wisps of smoke. The hooded figures screamed in protest, their leader falling to his knees. "You don't understand what you've done. Without the guardians, the balance is destroyed." Anna turned to face him, her expression steely. "The only balance you care about is your control over this town. It ends now." The leader lunged at her, his face twisted with rage. Before he could reach her, Bailey intercepted, knocking him to the ground. The man scrambled to his feet, but the fight had left his eyes. He stumbled back into the shadows, disappearing into the forest with the remnants of his group. Anna and Grace stood in the clearing, their breaths heavy and their bodies aching. Bailey trotted over to Anna, his tail wagging slightly as if to say, "We did it." The forest fell silent once more, the oppressive energy replaced by a sense of peace. "We stopped them," Grace said, her voice filled with relief. "It's over." Anna knelt beside Bailey, scratching behind his ears. "It's over," she agreed, though she knew their lives would never be the same. The morning sun rose over the forest, casting warm, golden light through the treetops. The shadows that once seemed so menacing now appeared soft and harmless. The oppressive weight that had hung over the woods was gone, replaced by an air of tranquility and renewal. Anna, Grace, and Bailey emerged from the clearing, their steps slower but filled with a sense of purpose. The events of the night felt like a distant nightmare, yet the memory of what they had faced remained vivid in their minds. As they approached the edge of the forest, Anna looked back one last time. The clearing was barely visible now, but she could still see the broken altar and the remnants of the shattered box. It was a stark reminder of the power that had been wielded there and the bravery it had taken to stop it. "Do you think they'll come back?" Grace asked, her voice soft and tinged with lingering fear. Anna shook her head. "Without the guardians and the altar, they've lost their power. They might try, but they won't be able to control the forest or the town again." Bailey barked in agreement, wagging his tail as he nudged Anna's hand. She smiled and knelt beside him, running her fingers through his fur. "You were incredible, Bailey," she said. "We couldn't have done it without you." Grace crouched beside them, scratching behind Bailey's ears. "He really is a hero," she said. "If he hadn't led us to that tree, we'd never have known what was happening." Bailey wagged his tail harder, as if he understood every word of their praise. The trio continued their journey back to town, the landscape gradually transitioning from dense forest to open fields. The village came into view, its familiar rooftops and winding streets bathed in the soft glow of morning light. When they entered the town square, they were greeted by a mix of curious and relieved faces. Word of their disappearance the night before had spread quickly, and the villagers were eager to know what had happened. Anna and Grace recounted their story, detailing the events in the forest and the strange group's sinister plans. As they spoke, the crowd's expressions shifted from disbelief to shock, and finally, to gratitude. "I can't believe they were using the forest for something so dark," one villager said, shaking his head. "We owe you so much," another added. "You've saved us all." Anna felt a wave of humility wash over her. She had acted out of instinct and a desire to protect, never expecting to be seen as a savior. "It wasn't just us," she said, glancing at Bailey. "He was the one who led us there. He knew something was wrong before anyone else." The villagers turned their attention to Bailey, who sat proudly at Anna's side, his tail thumping against the ground. A cheer erupted from the crowd, and someone suggested hosting a celebration in Bailey's honor. As plans for the celebration began to take shape, Anna and Grace slipped away from the commotion, needing a moment of quiet after the chaos. They sat on the steps of the town hall, watching as the villagers buzzed with energy. "I still can't believe it," Grace said, her gaze distant. "Everything we saw, it felt like something out of a story." Anna nodded. "It does, but it also reminds me of how much we don't understand about the world around us. There's so much more to life than what we can see or explain." Grace smiled faintly. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing. If Bailey taught us anything, it's that sometimes we just have to trust our instincts and follow the signs." Anna looked down at Bailey, who had curled up at her feet. "He's more than a hero," she said. "He's family." The celebration that evening was a lively affair, with music, laughter, and stories shared under the stars. Bailey was the center of attention, receiving treats and pats from everyone in the village. Anna and Grace watched from the sidelines, their hearts full as they saw the town come together in gratitude and joy. As the night wore on, Anna found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here. It had been terrifying and unpredictable, but it had also been a testament to the strength of their bond and their willingness to stand up for what was right. She turned to Grace and said, "Whatever comes next, I know we'll face it together." Grace nodded, her expression resolute. "Together," she echoed. Bailey barked as if to seal their promise, and the three of them shared a moment of quiet understanding. They had faced the darkness and come out stronger for it. When the celebration finally ended, and the village fell silent once more, Anna, Grace, and Bailey returned home. The weight of the night lifted as they stepped through the door, finding solace in the familiarity of their surroundings. As Anna prepared for bed, she looked out the window at the forest in the distance. It seemed peaceful now, the shadows no longer threatening. She felt a sense of closure, knowing they had done everything they could to protect their home and each other. With Bailey curled up at her feet and Grace asleep in the next room, Anna closed her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt truly at peace. And in the quiet of the night, the forest stood as a silent witness to their bravery, its secrets now laid to rest. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of loyalty, courage, and discovery. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to join our community of animal lovers and adventurers. Let's keep uncovering the amazing connections between humans and animals, one tale at a time. And if you're ready for another inspiring story, click here to watch our next video. You won't believe the extraordinary bond in that one. See you there.